A reading of the Steam Powered Giraffe fanfiction, Auspicious, by Garecc. A character study in second person, following Peter Walter III's life, from going off to World War I, to meeting Ignatius, to death. A 3-style fic. Read by amuseoffirebane. So, war. You were 21. You weren't a child, really. Not really. But you were 21. 21 is young. And you were going to war. Your father sent you off with a squeeze to your shoulder. Your brother sent you off with a lopsided half-smile. Your mother sent you off with a hug that lasted longer than she'd ever held you before. You knew you might not come back. Your brother, your mirror, was quiet. Was quiet until he wasn't. Until he said, after dashing the lengths to the carriage, after every intended goodbye, down the drive and to where you sat, packed away in the buggy already. He reached in, through the window, caught your hand. He was looking at you with his blue matter blue eyes. Frantic, frantic. Then, "Don't get yourself killed, Pete." And you'd said, "I won't, Peter." And Peter looked at you, wild-eyed still, gripping your hand with his blue-tinged knuckles, and you, for a moment, you worried. But well, the automatons would be there, and you're there to keep them from breaking. You're there to maintain them as they fight. You're there to keep them battle-worthy, rescue mission-worthy, service-worthy. You're important. You probably won't see front lines often. But as Peter looks at you, frantic-eyed, grasping the depth of danger as his cane digs a hole in the mud, you squeeze his hand back. "Peter," you repeat, "I'll be home soon." And then the carriage starts forward and Peter steps back, and you turn away from him because if you see his face fall, if you see him worried, you would worry. You would worry. You don't think you can quite afford to worry. You don't think worry is very good for war. A long time later, he'd jab you in the ribs and say he never worried a second. But you both knew that was never going to be true. You both knew that was never once true. War is war. War is war. You write Peter letters from the hangars they have you in. Your hands are always stained with oil, always bruised with overwork. Your robots come back battered from the field, and you have to work nights and days to keep them running. Your robots come back with blood worked into their finger joints and shaking. Your robots come back with oil streaks down their face plates, so stubborn you have to take the metal off and buff them clean. You write Peter letters, and none of them are quite true. You let your robots write on your letters, and you think they're more honest than you ever could be. Peter is soft. Peter can't know all this. He would never be able to handle all this. They send you to the front with the robots. They're working in the medical tents. They're running the injured from the field to here. There are so many injured they can't afford to send them back to you for repairs. There are so many bodies. There is blood on your pants. There is blood under your nails mixing with oil. There is blood. Just blood. Only blood. You don't see the combat often, not with your own 2 eyes. Only when the robots are sent in. They aren't sent in often. They're programmed for search and rescue, for moving cargo, for assistance. But they are also programmed for war, and you are holding a gun. You are, in fact, holding a gun. Rabbit lights your cigarette with the flamethrower your father installed in her throat. She grins at you with copper teeth. You'll be fine, Pete," she says. "I've got a Gatling gun." And she does. She does. You put it on this morning. You take a drag of nicotine and try to calm your nerves. It's war. It's war. It's war. You don't like preparing the bots for battle with their weapons. You and Peter spent months readying them for the stage. You don't like taking off Rabbit's hand and swapping it out for the saw, even if she usually uses it to cut people out of certain death when they're trapped. You don't like installing the Gatling gun back onto her arm that you so carefully rewired to press keyboard buttons. You don't like the way the spine stares into the distance as you load battery cells into his Tesla coil. You don't like the way that Hatchworth has to awkwardly sit for you to access his ammunition storage. You don't like how the John shifts, nervous under your hands as you mount his rocket launcher. You don't like the way Upgrade stares at you as you refill her compartments of replacement parts, as you run ammunition into her guns. You and Peter rebuilt them for the stage. You're glad Peter doesn't have to see them like this. You're glad Peter is home. You're just glad Peter is home. You and Peter turned 22 last week. You've never been apart so long. The robots wanted to celebrate. You just wanted to scream. You're glad Peter's home. You are glad that Peter is home. His letters are often, yours might be dwindling. He's written you about a lady he met at a stage play. Mary is her name. She was one of the actresses, and he's moving forward. You feel like you and the robots are only moving back. It's war. What else is there to say? It's war. The robots saved dozens of men. For their work, you're named a colonel. For their heroism, you are rewarded. Colonel Peter Alexander Walter III. It distinguishes your name from your brother's for the first time in your life. But your father is a colonel, so perhaps it only confuses things more. Peter's letter jokes about it. After 22 years, you can be colonel. You can only feel sick, sick, sick. And then you go home. And then you go home, and you thought you would be able to go back to how it was. And then you go home and it feels like you're suffocating in open air. Peter is different. Peter is older. You are older too, but you feel like you're drowning. You can't handle people walking behind you. You can't handle people slamming doors. You're angry. You're angry all the time. And you thought it would be the same, but it's not. Peter is different. Peter is courting a woman named Mary Mickelson. Mary Mickelson has run off from her family on a farm all the way in Virginia, and apparently lives in Peter's room. Here, despite the fact she and him aren't married. It makes sense, Pete. She's trying to make it big in acting. Board is expensive. She sleeps in your bed, Peter, you point out. You're laying on the floor, and Peter is staring down at you, arms crossed, and you wish it were just how it was. And Peter stares at you, and you stare back, and you cannot take any of this. I'm here now. You don't have to stall the wedding. It comes out rough, angry, and you don't know why, but you are. You are at him in his dream life, while you feel like some rotting limb stapled to him that he has to drag around after him, and he sits next to you on the floor, which you are still laying on, and his face is blue around the edges, bluer than it was before. And his black hair looks purple at the roots, and your hands aren't stained with oil, but his are blue to the knuckles now, and he lays next to you on the floor, and you feel like you're falling further down anyway. I'm not stalling anything, Pete. She can't get married because her producer wants her to pretend to be having an affair with her co-star. She tells me it'll end once the movie is out. Publicity. But until then, she needs to say Mickelson. And you're fine with that? You ask, aghast, pushing yourself up. Pete, he looks up at you now. I'd be fine with anything she gives me. You don't understand him anymore. And that's worse than him changing, really. That you don't understand him anymore. Peter's busy. Peter's busy and you can't stand it. Mary takes him to shows, to plays, to operas, to sets, all across the state. And he said he would work on Steam Powered Band with you when you got back. Would help you sequence and program more songs with the robots for them to sing. That he would help you with it. But he is busy. He is busy and you feel like you are only falling behind. The robots still sing, though, just like you and him built them to. They seem happier on stage. You wish you did. You wish you felt anything at all. You work on songs with the robots. You want to get them back on stage regularly. You work until your hands are numb. You work until you collapse at your desk. But Peter is busy with Mary, and you are busy with Steam Powered Band. You feel like you are falling, or failing, or both. Your father steps into your workshop one night. He puts a hand on your shoulder, stands behind you, tousles your hair, and you are so tired you can hardly think to say, "I'm busy." And your father pulls a second chair from the wall, sits next to you, and you feel like your lungs are going to burst. They're so tight in your chest. You can't look at him. "Son," he says, and you're his second. You're his reclusive one. You're the one who can't get over war. You're the one who... "Pete," he says again, and you look over at him, and he's worried. You're worrying him. You're worrying everyone. "Have you ever thought about attending college?" he asks. And no, you haven't really, but... "Yes," you say, instead of the truth, because maybe taking initiative is good. Your father raises an eyebrow, but you keep his gaze, and he squeezes your shoulder again. "Good, because I think you should enroll next semester. You need to do something other than sit in this workshop." And you want to protest. You don't want to leave again, but you nod instead, because you'd do whatever he wants to if it means being more than his second son, being more than a warped reflection of your brother. Then, you go to college. You go to college, and that's when your life really starts again. It's in a mathematics class that you sort of despise, that a man who takes the seat next to you introduces himself. He has long black hair tied up behind him, a sharp jaw, and green eyes so green you think they can't be real. And that's when you meet him. And that's when he meets you. "Lovely to meet you," he says, after you cough out an awkward hello at his greeting. "My name is Ignatius Basile." And as he says it, it's like lightning or perhaps fire, because you stare. You stare. "Oh," you say to him. Peter Walter the Third." And you can see it in his face that he recognizes it, but his smile doesn't waver. If anything, it grows. "Well, Peter," he greets. He greets and he adds an R. And had you ever been called Peter with an R before then? "I hope we can get through this class together." He tilts his head sideways at the professor who, admittedly, is a bit bumbling. "I haven't much faith in the faculty." And you laugh, and he sets his books on the table beside you, and you let him. You let him. And that's when everything started, really. You sort of wish you'd punched him then, but you never would have. You never, ever would have. You know you never, ever would have. Him. Ignatius Basile, your father's enemy's son. Ignatius Basile. He's a few years older than you. Ignatius Basile. Ignatius Basile. Ignatius Basile. He's perhaps the first friend you've ever had that wasn't also Peter's. He's perhaps the first friend you've ever had that didn't compare you to Peter. He's brilliant. He's smarter than you think you ever could be. He invites you to his lodging, gets you a glass of whiskey, and you talk, you smoke, and you're friends. You're friends. There's no merry needling into conversation, spiriting him away. There's no robots causing an incident you need to fix before something explodes. There's just him. And the thing is, you do rather like his company. Peter writes you weekly. You write him as often as you can between classes. This is not the longest you've gone without seeing him. He mentions Mary. He mentions Mother. He mentions Father. You do not mention Ignatius. Peter. Your brother Peter. Your sweet brother Peter who never saw war. Your sweet, stupid brother with a woman who's still not marrying him as her dreams unfold on camera. Peter Walter II. Your wonderful brother who your father looks at like he's still something still. Your suave brother whose woman draws looks from every man watching the silver screen. Your soft brother who never saw bodies and heard bullets hailing. Your brother who your father likes rather than is nervous for. Your brother who you miss like a gored open wound. Your brother who is growing tired of you. Your brother who you were too much for now that you can't stop thinking about death and bullets and war. Now that he was the only one who could pull you from your head, your brother who is hundreds of miles away. You write him as often as you can. You do not mention Ignatius. Ignatius has a son, you learn. A son. You learn when you duck into his house after a late science class, bottle of whiskey already in hand, intending to drink away the night with him, as you oft do, only to find him sitting on his sofa with a very small boy. Ignatius tells the child to stay as he pulls you away into the hall. You are sort of just standing there as Ignatius paces up and down his hall, explaining, irate, with red flushed cheeks and wide eyes, that the boy was at his cousin's, but she's refusing to watch the boy further, too busy with her own new baby, and so he's been sent up here with only a letter and last month's money he sent down, and you loop your arm through his and say, Ignatius, his name rolls off your tongue. Let's get you a drink, and then we'll clear out your office, get him a bed in the morning, the couch will do for a night. And you can feel him, tense as a live wire, as overwound clockwork, and you can practically feel his butterfly pulse under your hand. But he lets you. He sags sideways, lets you walk him to his work desk, lets you shrug his coat off his shoulders, still on from hours earlier when you saw him this morning. You're right, Peter, he says. You're always right. Thank you. Of course. Yes. You pour him a drink as the child stares at you with eyes as green as his father's from the couch. He's perhaps 3 or 4, nebulously between the two. A son. Well, at least a son won't actively convince him you're insane, like a brother's betrothed might. Ignatius calls you Peter. Peter with an R. Peter with an R. Your brother has always been Peter with an R. You've always been Pete. The second with the name, the third to be called it. Peter was born first, Pete. It's only fair you get the nickname as second child. Second child. Ignatius calls you Peter with an R. You've always just wanted someone to just look at you and see you, and not a paler, shakier, angrier version of your brother who never went to war. Certainly, Peter with an R is sicker than you. Certainly he's never been as strong as you, with joints that don't work very well, just enough so he was useless to the draft. Certainly he's soft, academic to your inventor, theoretical to your doing. He's ideas, he's wonder. He would never have made it into war. But you are twins. And the thing is, he's Peter with an R, and he's probably the better one. Certainly so after the war. Certainly so now that you are here at college, downing whiskey with the son of your father's enemy. You are the third Peter Walter, and you are here, not there, not home, not clinging white-knuckled to your brother to feel real again. Not there, not looking your mother in the eyes after a day locking yourself in the basement with the robots, while your brother was out in the park with his lady. Not there with Peter with an R, with Peter. You're Peter, you are not there. You are here with him. And to him you are Peter. Not Pete, not the second, not the third. For once you are just Peter. But your Peter isn't here. But he is. He is. And you wish Peter were here, you do. With every breath crushed out of your lungs, you wish Peter were here. You don't hardly know how to exist without him. But here, you're Peter. And you're here with him. Ignatius Basile. Ignatius Basile. Ignatius Basile. He's smart. He's charming. He doesn't look at you and see Peter in off color. He doesn't look at you and see the warped version of your reflection. He doesn't look at you and see Peter but broken. He looks at you and just sees Peter with an R. He just sees you. He talks about elephants and giraffes like it's a buried hatchet, and not your father's story he tells at lunch, grandiose, victorious. He talks about it as water beneath a crumbling bridge, history, and not a topic that makes the robots quiet and talk quietly between themselves. He talks about it and not everything that colored his world, because every moment of it colored yours. You grew up around your father, grandiose talking points about mines and environmental disaster and thievery and crimes. You grew up around your father tight-lipped until your mother leaves the room, talking about Delilah Morio and how brilliant she was, how he'd fight a war in her name again. You grew up with every moment colored by giraffes in blue, blue, blue. And he makes it seem like it's nothing. A funny story between a dead man and an alive one. He makes it seem like it's nothing. And you sit there as he toasts you to the future and realize it is nothing, isn't it? What was your father thinking? What was his father thinking? It's business of the past, the dead, the damned. You and him are the future. You still write Peter as often as you can. You still don't mention Ignatius as much as you ought to. A friend, you call him. My friend. My friend. Because he's the son of Thaddeus Basile. Because your father would snap, lose his mind, run his fuse to the powder. Because your father would drag you home back to that house and Peter in his perfect life with Mary. And there you are nothing but a duplicate of someone less ruined than yourself. And there you are Pete. But here you are Peter with an R. You still wish Peter was here, but not as much as you used to. Ignatius is your friend, and you don't need Peter as much here as you do at home. You're starting to wonder if you need him at all. After all, you have him now. You have him now. Ignatius's son is sweet. He's sweet and smart. You will give him that. His name is Norman Basile, and more often than not, you have been roped into child watching at the hours when Ignatius has class and you do not. You've watched the boy disassemble and reassemble a clockwork bird you built approximately 1,000 times now. It keeps him entertained well enough while you scratch down essays at his desk, which now lives in the living space, though the bird's twisted chirping is, albeit, a bit distracting. The boy is smart. He also follows you somewhat like a puppy around the house. You've learned his favorite foods, and how to read him to sleep when he's particularly hyper at night, and Ignatius is still out late. You don't mind him as much as you originally thought you might. He's a sweet child. Ignatius and you spend the nights listening to the radio, complaining of classes, tinkering with half-built machines, drinking and smoking. The boy sleeps early enough and sound enough that the nights are at least yours. On most days, you both end up laughing so hard over some nonsense you can't breathe. On most days, it's nice. On other days, it isn't. You're standing beside him. He has been pacing the halls for hours. You only got him sitting when you promised you'd spend the night here. That you won't leave him. His nerves are getting to him. Test soon. End of the semester melancholic panic. First he tells you he's been having nightmares. You have those? Bodies and bullets. Oil caked in layers on your hands. About the war? You ask. You ask because you can only assume he fought, was drafted. But he shakes his head, harsh, and you pry his fingers from his palms where his nails crowd crescents into his skin. No, Peter, no, not the war, he manages once you've linked his hand in yours. You don't know how else to make him stop, short of forcibly cutting his 2 long nails in the midst of whatever this is. I was hardly in it. And you can see the way his shoulders are shaking, and you wonder if Peter felt like this whenever you pounded on his door in the night. You would do that. Too often, perhaps. You would pound on Peter's door until he swung it open, until Peter stared at you, blocking his room. You could always still see his Mary staring at you from Peter's bed, her hair done up in curlers. Livid again at you for doing this again. You keep doing this, and Peter would have to walk you back to your room as you shook, as you couldn't stop the words pouring from your lips, Peter, the only thing holding you up as your legs threatened to give beneath you. And Peter would have to sit you down on your bed, stay there until you remembered how to breathe around the gun smoke that never really left your throat. He'd need to hold your sobbing body against his, and you'd just wish he could stay like you used to when he was young and couldn't sleep. Stay like you did when he would stay in his bed and fight his dragons with wooden swords until the sun rose. But once he was sure you weren't going to collapse in on yourself, he'd leave. He'd always leave. Leave you. Return to his room with you in the dark for Mary. 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 You wonder if this is how Peter felt when you did all that. Yeah? You say, as Ignatius looks at you with wild eyes, wet eyes, cornered. I was raised by my aunt, Peter, because my father was killed by his... Ignatius had stuttered as he speaks then. And you know now, and this is the last time you could have backed out. And you should have, but instead, you hold his hand as tight as you can, as he leans into you, shaking like the winter has wormed into his bones. And you knew then, you knew as you exhale, sharp, panicked, that he trusts you. He said she was his wife, Peter. He said she was his wife. My mother was dead by then, a fever years prior. I was young, perhaps 5, 6, but And you knew as you pulled him against you, clumsy about his elbows, awkward. You've never held anyone. Peter never needed to be held, never since he was small and you're out of practice. But you knew you trusted him too. You held him then. That night, you held him. She was tall, too tall. Peter, my father was short, Peter, but she towered beside him, and her hair was brown, matted, like a street dog. It was falling out, mange in her hands. He was holding one of hers as she stood there. It was too long, Peter, and her eyes were wrong. All green. There was only green. I don't know what he did, Peter, but there was something wrong with her. He'd fallen against you then, clawing with his free hand at your back, shuddering, and you are all he has. You think you are all he has. I don't know what I saw, Peter. I don't. I was too young, I think, but he took her out of the basement of that house he had then. I was never allowed down, but Peter, and his voice breaks, shatters like a splintering piece of wood cracking. He called her his wife, Peter, and her face, it cracked, twisted. Ignatius, you say, and you don't know what to say, but he's shaking in you. What would Peter do, you think? Hate yourself for it, that even now you look to him. But you don't know how to help. You don't know what to do other than keep his hand in your own, than to wrap your other arm around him. Peter, no, listen, please. And he's shaking. Tell me if I'm insane. If I am, Peter, he called her his wife, and she turned more than something living can. It was when he said wife in her eyes, Peter. I remember seeing his shadow on the wall. The light from them was so bright as she reached into him and pulled out his heart, Peter, his blood, the woman, the thing, it drank his blood, it ate his heart. If I'm insane, Peter, tell me, please. And then it looked at me and he's looking at you, now eyes wide, hair a mess, shaking. I was sure it would kill me too, but it dropped him, my father, as it saw me, and I don't know, Peter, But you know. Your father told you as much. What green matter does to those who it infests. And you know, looking back now, at this moment you chose what would happen from here. You offered him the apple. Your father was Thaddeus Basile, you say, as he shudders there in your arms. And Ignatius? I think I have a rather certain idea what that was. You offered him the apple, and with desperation he bit into it. Green matter. He knew of it, of course he did, but his father died when he was so small much of the details hardly stuck. He knew of mines, he knew of elephants, he knew his aunt had told him it ruined his father's mind, and you tell him all of it you know. And the story comes together as he stops shaking quite so terribly. His expression changes as everything slots together. You don't know who that woman is, was, went, but your father showed you photos once when you asked, of the twisted bodies of the poor men who operated the elephants. Too long, green, he said, crystals growing from their guts, glowing from the photos. And you can tell as he asks question after question, a desperate sort of recognition that the box is open and hope sleeps still inside. Of course, well, you know what happens. And then he founds Basile Industries once he graduates. And he does graduate before you. You stay in touch. Of course you do. Of course you do. It's him. But, well, that only lasts so long. Your father finds a letter first, signed, with love, Ignatius Basile. When you're downstairs, finds your photos of you, of him, soon after he drags you to the table where it's all laid out. What is this, Pete? Is all he'd said to you. Cold. And, well, it's damning. Of course it is. Of course it was. You'd taken photos with him when you went on an overseas trip to one of the candy mines under the guise of wanting to see where your father spent so much time fighting. There's a photo of him holding a crystal with his smile. There's a photo you had taken of the two of you in front of the 25-year-old remnants of an elephant. There's photos of quite a lot of things. And your father screams himself hoarse when you fail to justify any of it with anything beyond. He's my friend. And it's not as if the way he's holding you in some of those photos particularly reflects that word, a friend. And Peter stands frozen next to him, staring at you like he doesn't even know you. Perhaps he doesn't. You didn't mention him in your letters. And your father tells you to get out, and Peter says nothing. And your mother tries to talk, rushes after you, but you're already out the door. You go to him. Of course you do. You show up at his house. It's not far, and you've been many times. He answers, sees you, and Peter, he says, as you fall forward against him, with nothing but a name that isn't even yours, with nothing at all left. And he shuts the door in, and this time it's him walking you to somewhere to sit. Him letting you scream furious tears about your father, your brother, your life into his chest. And it's him who says, "You're staying." It's firm, with the sort of finality he only gets when he's furious. And you look up on his couch, his hands in yours. "What?" you say. And he puts a hand to your cheek and says, "Of course you are, Peter. Of course you are." And you do. And he kisses you. And you were always going to stay. And you were always going to stay. You spend months with him. You try to forget. Forget Peter's empty eyes. Forget the harrowed look on your mother's face as she reached for you as you turn. Forget the way your father snapped. And you managed to, mostly. You managed to until Peter's wedding invitation and a desperate apologizing letter arrive at his door. Ignatius stops you from tearing it up. "Peter," he holds it away, the invitation, as you pace, shaking, you're so angry, shaking at the audacity, shaking at the everything, until he catches your hand. "Peter, you miss him." And Peter says, "Pete, you're my brother." And Peter says, "Pete, please come home." And Peter says, "Pete, Mom is sick with worry." And Peter says, "Pete, Father's getting sicker." And Peter says, "Pete, the robots miss you." And Peter says, "Pete, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And Peter says, "Pete, I can't do this without you." And Peter says, "Pete, you're my brother." And Peter says, "Pete, I'm getting married." And Peter says, "Pete, I want you to be my best man." And he takes you close and he tells you, "Peter, go be his best man." And you say, "Only if he lets me bring you." And he looks at you and says, "Okay, Peter, okay." You meet with Peter before the wedding. He holds you like he hasn't in years. You forgot, you think. You forgot that he needs you as much as you need him. When you say you'll be his best man if and only if Ignatius can attend, he says yes without hesitation. He missed you. He's your brother. You missed him. You bring him to your brother's wedding. It's your compromise. Your father shakes his hand. Your brother marries Mary. It goes better than you thought it would. You bring him home with you. You walk him through the doors of your manor, your brother's manor. And do I even need to say it? You know how this goes. You introduce him to the robots. You don't catch the look he has as he shakes Rabbit's hand. You don't catch any of it at all. Do I even need to say it? You know just how this goes. He gets more ambitious. You start to catch that. At first you think it's harmless as he makes deals that would have Peter swooning at the money involved. At first you think it's nothing as he starts experimenting further with green matter. "Peter, I'm not my father," he says to you over a drink. "I won't overdo it. I'm not going to get anyone killed." You know exactly how this goes. He gets less careful, you absolutely catch that. He has Norman working with green matter now, and he's still a teenager. And you tell him that's a bad idea. But he waves off your concerns, says he knows what he's doing. You know exactly how this goes. He gets more ruthless. You have absolutely no idea what to think of that. He undercuts your brother in an auction. He snipes staff from under you. You ask him what he's doing sharp after Peter tells you. He tells you, it's just business, Peter. It's just good business. You tell him it's not just business. It's your brother's livelihood. It's your home. It's your robot. It's your life. And you know exactly how this goes. He's different. He's different, and you can't hardly talk to him. His eyes were never this green before. You don't recognize him, and as he greets you after having undercut your family out of a major buyer with a smile, you tell him to never talk to you again over shaking hands. You tell him to never talk to you again. You're done. You're done. Peter has no idea how he's going to keep the money in the green, and you have never felt more sick, and he has the audacity to look hurt. He has the audacity to ask why, and you know exactly how this goes. His eyes are far too green. He knows how to get into the manor. You gave him a key, and the spine tells you, louder than you've ever heard him, that he took Rabbit. You know exactly how this is going to go. You and Peter go get ready. Your niece Wanda's husband, a professor, a young man you quite like, volunteers himself with you. The spine is sparking and glitching as you get everyone into the car. You know where he is going to be. You're standing in front of him. Norman is behind him, next to Rabbit. Rabbit who is strapped to a table. Rabbit who is pried open. Rabbit who is sobbing. Ignatius looks at you, his arms crossed. Peter, he greets. I thought you wanted nothing to do with me. He tilts his head, feigning innocent as Rabbit screams. And Peter is next to you, and Peter is seething. You've never seen him this mad in your life, and everything has fallen apart. Ignatius, you say, just give us Rabbit. You know him so well. You're sure you can talk him down. There is something wrong with him. The roots of his hair burn green against his hairline, and this isn't him, you think. He'd never do this. But as he steps forward, his eyes are green, all green, and you know what green matter poisoning looks like. Just, Ignatius, I'm sorry. And you can talk him down. You can get him away from his lab, and you should have done something. And he falters a moment, wavering. And you see him. He's still there. You can fix this, fix him. Maybe you can talk him down. No, you're not, he says. Peter, I think you made yourself very clear last time we talked. I don't even need the robot for long. I just need to figure out how it works. I'll give it right back. And you can still see him. But Peter never knew him. And Peter snaps. You see it in his eyes next to you as he abruptly lunges and Ignatius pulls a lever. And you always knew how this was going to end. And Ignatius pulls the lever, and everything goes blue. Fractal lightning blue, and everything goes fractal, brilliant blue. You fall, your head splitting, falling in verse, and you scream as Peter, and you scream as Guy, and you scream, and you break. And as the fog clears, and your brother is gone, and your nephew-in-law is gone, and you can't move, But you hear him, you hear Ignatius, you hear him, as you manage to find your body, as you manage to get an arm under you, your left isn't moving right, you stand, and the spine is next to Rabbit, and your brother is, and Peter is, and it is just you and Ignatius, and there is nothing left. And Ignatius has killed your brother. And he's killed your twin brother. And Rabbit is sobbing. And the spine is sparking. And Norman is only blood. And Ignatius falls to his knees. And Ignatius is shaking. And Ignatius has killed your brother. And Ignatius's arm is only blood. And you don't care. This was always going to happen. You're home again. Eventually. In the manner that is yours, not Peter's, because Peter is dead, and your niece's husband is dead, and your brother's son is the only one who can fix Rabbit because you can hardly get out of bed, and your brother is dead, and Ignatius killed him. Things keep on, and your brother is dead. Peter's daughter hasn't stopped crying. Peter's daughter has lost just as much as you. Peter's daughter is the last thing you care about right now. You bring Mark up to your office, the office that was Peter's, and you tell him that you and him need to get all this together. You tell him things are going to be hard. You tell him you know his wife just died 3 years ago, but his father is dead now, and he's got to be a man now. He's got to help run the company now. And Mark looks at you. He looks at you with hollowed eyes, his father just buried, and nods. Money gets worse. Money gets worse. And Mark crashes his Cadillac into the ocean. And you can hardly move your left arm. You can hardly even work after the stroke. You can't care for his son. And Wanda can hardly care for herself. The boy is placed elsewhere. On top of everything, the boy is placed elsewhere. And money gets even worse. Norman shows up at your doorstep one evening. He's hardly 26, and he can hardly walk. You let him in. Of course you do. You watched him grow up. He tells you his father kicked him out. He tells you his father can't handle him. He tells you a lot of things. He tells you he has no idea where else he can go. He can't work anymore, he says between tears. He can hardly think anymore, and, well, he was always sort of your stepson. Then he writes you a letter. Then Ignatius writes you a letter, and you are in a wind tunnel the moment you see the stamp. He doesn't make sense in the letter, words formatted oddly, sentence structure off, and you know he's not him anymore. You know he's too far gone to green matter, and what's left of him is all but an animated corpse. But you are in a wind tunnel, and it is 1955. And Peter is dead. And really, what on earth do you have left to lose? He has an offer, and it's enough money that it would fix everything. Everything. It would get you out of debt. It would pay for Norman's surgeries. It would pay enough to get things running again. Your father is dead. Your brother is dead. Your nephew is dead. Your niece is crumbling apart. And the only price is letting him into Kazooland. The only price is letting him in. And what do you have left to lose? He wants out of this world and he wants into another. He wants somewhere new. He's ruined it all here, he writes, in lilted handwriting so different from the swooping cursive he would write in so long ago. He's ruined it all here, Peter. He wants somewhere else. And, well, you shouldn't say yes. He killed your brother. But you loved him. You loved him. You write him back. You accept his deal. And he's not there, not behind those all-green eyes as you shake his hand when you tell him how to enter Kazooland, because the person whose hand you are shaking is not him. You remember being 24 years old, when there was still light. You remember holding him in that college apartment, and you think, no, you know that you could have talked him down in that room with Peter. He still loved you. He still loves you now, somewhere. Even if he's arrested not a month later for trying to pay someone to break into your manor. He wouldn't have written otherwise. But he is as good as dead. Ignatius is not him anymore. And Peter is still dead, and you're tired. And Ignatius lashes out like an animal in death throes, he does. He's arrested, and then you're in court all the time, looking at him. Him as his hair grows in green, as his skin is a sickly, infected green. And you are tired. And you've never been more tired. And you miss him, but he is gone. Norman testifies in court, and you are tired. The stress is getting to you, and your hair has never been more blue. What a pair you both turn into. You have never been more tired. You can feel this splintering you. You can feel it. You don't sleep well, the nightmares of bodies and bullets returned. You don't eat. Everything tastes like ash. And finally, you're in your office. Your arm hurts. Your chest feels tight, hurting. You chalk it up to the stroke until you put your head down and realize that probably you are going to die. But Peter is all ready, and your mother is all ready, and your father is all ready, and in every way that matters, he is all ready. And you have nothing left to lose. And you die. And time marches on.